action next week. Excited for that, as always.
Yeah. We've got
Um,
not a great slate this week, but we've got some games to look out for. You got the BC Clemson game.
mhm.
DJ is going to be starting, like you said, five-star recruit. I think he was the number one quarterback in this class, so they won't miss too much from Lawrence this week. But, BC is a tough team, so we'll see how that goes. Uh, Next game I've got is Georgia U and Kentucky.
Mhm.
That should be an interesting one. Kentucky, you can't tell week to week. I think eventually you got to start JT Daniels if you're Georgia.
I mean yeah, yes, I agree with you, but the thing is your one loss with Stetson at quarterback is the Alabama game. I think you got to give him. You can't take him out as long as Georgia's winning. As long as
Mm-hmm.
Georgia's winning, you keep him in there. Once he loses a game, you have a little more reason to. Um,
My
then I think maybe you do, but I think Georgia. I, I think Kentucky maybe scores 10 points against Georgia.
Yeah, but my only thing with going back to JT and Stetson is, the Alabama game, Georgia was leading at halftime.
Hmm.
They come out
Hmm.
in the second half. He makes a couple mistakes. They don't do anything. Bama's on the field for the majority of the second half. I think that's ultimately why they lost is because their defense just got too tired being on the field the whole second half pretty much. And, you've got Kentucky this week, but you've got Florida next week. And, I don't know if I want to throw them out there against Florida. Florida's got a very bad defense, but at the same time, I think eventually, you got to start JT because Jamie Newman didn't leave or opt out because of Stetson Bennett. He opted out because he saw JT Daniels and he knew, okay, this guy's probably better than I am, going to give better shot for
Hmm.
Georgia going into the playoffs.
I think that they're in a good spot this week where they can beat Kentucky by enough to get Daniels in the game, get him some experience, and then if they want to make that decision, they can. I just don't think you can pull a kid who's winning you football games is all. But I do agree with you. I think Daniels getting him was a good get for them in the transfer portal, and I think that he's going to be on the field before the end of the year.
Right.
Biggest game I'm looking forward to. I know we can touch on the Ohio State Penn State game, but biggest game I'm looking forward to this weekend as a Big 12 fan, Texas Oklahoma State, simply because kind of hit on it when we did the recap of the Big 12. Big game for Oklahoma State, undefeated. They want to get to where they want to go in the playoff and winning the Big 12. They got to beat Texas. I know Texas isn't great this year, but you can't lose to Texas and win the Big 12. In my mind. Um,
One, Texas has nothing to lose, so they're going to give
right,
everything they got in this game. They've
right,
got nothing to lose and
yeah.
everything to gain. So,
Exactly, and you're coming off your Oklahoma State. You played a home game last week, home game this week. You're coming off a win against Iowa State, who that was I think one of the bigger games of the weekend last week. So I don't know, big game in the Big 12. I think if Oklahoma State loses, it opens up a lot more possibilities. If they win, right now they have a hold of the number one seed going into the Big 12, winning the conference. So I think a big game there.
yeah.
3 p.m. on Fox. We can talk about this later, but they're only a 3-point favorite at home against Texas. I think that's a very interesting line.
I think,
So
well, yeah, I think it's an interesting line. I also think, like I noted earlier, Sam Ellinger has to do everything
yeah,
for Texas to succeed. And the fact that Oklahoma State's defense is so good, I don't think you can be that type of team where one guy has to do everything for them to beat you.
and to that point, having that in mind, thinking about that Iowa State game last week, I obviously being an Iowa State fan. Iowa State has a tight end, Charlie Kohler, who, assuming he leaves at the end of this year to go to the NFL, is going to be probably the second or third tight end off the board. He is their go-to receiver. Oklahoma State shut him down. They made it life tough on the wide receivers of Iowa State. They forced Purdy into some scrambles, to some tough decisions. Do I run it? Do I throw it? What do I do? I think that they can easily do that again with Ellinger. And like you said, Ellinger has to do everything. They're gonna make life tough on Ellinger. Um, and I think this is gonna be one of those games where the score is gonna be closer than what it really was. I think Oklahoma State controls this game. As long as they don't come out flat in the first quarter, if they come out in the first quarter, put up 14 points, I think that they are well on their way to winning, because I don't think they allow Texas to get anything going offensively like they did to Iowa State last weekend.
I'd agree. Yeah, and I mean, like you said, I mean they play good defense all around. It's not just pass defense. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just run defense. So they're going to make life tough for Ellinger. Texas is very one-dimensional. They don't have much of a run game outside of Ellinger scrambling and getting them yards. So it's going to be tough. I think that 3 points is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
If Spencer Sanders looks good, if Chuba Hubbard has a good game, this could easily get out of hand pretty quickly.
I agree with you. Um, Another game I'm looking at, and I can't believe I'm gonna say I'm actually looking forward to this game. Indiana and Rutgers, and maybe I'm not actually looking forward to watching it as much as I'm just saying you got two teams coming off two big wins, two emotional wins. Indiana now has to go on the road. They have a number by their name. They got to go to a place that you don't get hyped to go to Rutgers and play a football game. Um, but I don't know. I think this is a fun game for college football fans who know college football, who have been around the game, can say this is actually a game that I would tune into and watch. Indiana Rutgers, 2:30 on the Big Ten Network. I think this is a game that could be interesting. I think Rutgers, that defense, looked good. I think Indiana struggled a little last week against Penn State in the second half, so I'm interested to see what they do. But there's a, I think there's a really good chance Rutgers finds themselves sitting at 2-0 Saturday night.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Both teams had a bit of turnover luck. They took care of the
Hmm.
ball and they forced turnovers from the other team. It's a game where it's like, okay, who's actually good? Who's actually going to establish themselves on offense? Because neither team really had that great of an offensive showing. So I
Hmm.
think whoever takes care of the ball and establishes their offensive game plan better probably ends up winning this game. I wouldn't be surprised if Rutgers wins this game. Indiana could have a letdown here.
Yeah, I agree with you. Um, I got a would you rather, if you want to participate. Would you rather watch Ole Miss and Vanderbilt, or Wake Forest and Syracuse?
I mean, give me Wake Forest and Syracuse because at least Dino Barbers has his guys, playing hard and trying out there. With Vanderbilt, I don't even know if they're going to try. I mean,
Oh
I
man,
don't know what's going on there. So at least Syracuse will show up and try.
I'll tell you what, man. I love college football. I can watch almost every game, but wow, those are two games that I don't know. It would take some. You'd have to give me some money to watch those two
Yeah.
games. Um. Uh. I mean, we can talk about the Ohio State Penn State game. I think that's pretty much the last big game to note. On the
I've got one
weekend.
more. I've got one more if you want to
Okay.
talk about
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
before
Go
that.
ahead.
Another game. So I am a Group of Five fan,
Mhm.
obviously, but Memphis at Cincinnati.
Mhm.
This is another game.
Mhm.
Cincinnati's got a tough stretch here. They've got Memphis. They've got UCF coming up. They've got Houston next week. So they've got a tough 3 games in the next 4. Memphis is another offense who moves the ball up and down the field. Like I said, there could be some injury issues with Cincinnati's defense that I'm going to keep an eye on, tonight and going in tomorrow. So I think this is an interesting one. Do they have the same kind of showing that they had against SMU?
Yeah. This is a game I think. I agree with you. I'm excited to watch this game. The 11 a.m. slot is decent. This is one of, I think, the better games. 6.5 point favorite, Cincinnati at home. I think watching Cincinnati last week, offensively they're okay. They're nothing special. They're okay. I mean, if this is how Cincinnati wants to win games, where they shut down teams, um, and then they just score enough to win. I think this is another example of kind of what could this could be the same game we saw like last week against
Right.
SMU, right? High-powered offense, team that moves the ball up and down the yard. Cincinnati holds maybe Memphis at 300 yards, 350 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, and then their offense scores, 28-35 to win. I think we could just see the same game we saw last week against SMU. I think you're right in questioning how Cincinnati will come out. Will they come out with the same intensity they did last week? But I think that'll be a good game. I think Cincinnati wins just because I think that defense is built to try and contain high-powered offenses in the American, because there are a lot of them, and
Right.
um, I think Cincinnati wins the game, but I think it'll be a good game. I think it'll be an interesting game.
I think it will be interesting. Definitely want to keep an eye on, see how that defense looks. If you want to get into it, we can talk about Ohio State and Penn State, probably the biggest game of the
Yeah.
weekend.
Yep.
So I have a couple big questions. I've got 3 questions for you. First question: how does Penn State respond after a heartbreaking loss, controversial call, everything that happened? The media is talking about it all week. So how do you respond after that?
Well, that's tough, and to figure out. Now you also have, I think, they lost their top 2 running backs. I think their third string running back just got injured, and you're playing at home in what would have been your whiteout game with no fans. So you have to pile all that stuff on top of like what you said, and I think it helps that they're at home. I know there's no fans, but I think part of the way you overcome it is you're at home. You're not planning to go to Columbus, but I think if you're Penn State, you have to just realize that if we win this game, we beat Ohio State, we turn our entire season around, right? Like right now, you lose that game, it's a heartbreaking loss. I still don't think he got in. I think the ball hit out of bounds first before it hit the pylon, but I'm not a ref. I think you say our season right now is going downhill a little bit, right? Last game we shouldn't have lost.
Mm.
We beat Ohio State. All of a sudden, we now control our own destiny, right? You control the Big Ten East. I think that's how you have to try and overcome this, is stay within yourself, stay positive, and say all we have to do is win a game. We have to. It's against Ohio State, it's a big game, but all we have to do is win. We win, everything fixes itself. Everything works out. Everything now becomes us where we want to go. And I think that's if you're James Franklin, I think that's what you're telling your team.
My other question is, how do you respond defensively for Ohio State? You struggled, in that first half against Nebraska, and it is Nebraska. They're still figuring things out. A lot of people thought this would be the year they take a step.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They get kind of screwed with the scheduling. But, I mean, can this defense be good enough for them to be on the same level as your Clemson, as your Alabama?
Uh, I mean, I think defensively, if you're Ohio State, you have to still say we struggled early, but we're still a good defense, right? Like you can't be upset at allowing 17 points to Nebraska when the first touchdown was on the first drive of the game, where everything is scripted, everything went according to plan for Nebraska. So I think if you're Ohio State, you just have to say we essentially let up 1 touchdown,
Right.
right? A touchdown and a field goal. Um, and I think you also have to remind yourself, if you're Ohio State, Clifford threw 2 interceptions in the first half
Mhm.
against a defense that's not as good as yours, right?
Right.
So um, I think Ohio State is a lot less to worry about than Penn State does going into this game, in terms of how you play and fix things from last week.
Yeah, you kind of hit on the running back situation. That was the other question I had. But if turnovers are still a problem for Penn State, you can't take care of the football like you did against Indiana. How does how do they keep this game from being blown wide open? Because Ohio State is very talented on offense.
Yeah, I mean, first off, you can't give Ohio State more possessions than what they're already going to get. You can't. I mean, I know you can't turn the ball over in any game and expect to win the game, right? Like you can't do that. Every coach preaches we can't turn the ball over, got to win the turnover battle, yada yada yada. But if you're Penn State, you can, same thing when you're playing Alabama, same thing when you're playing these offenses that are very very good, is you can't give them extra possessions. And I think you have to say, if you're Penn State, we're not going to turn the ball over. If it comes down to it, fourth and whatever, unless we absolutely have to go for it, we are punting it away. We are playing the field position game. We're not giving Ohio State an option to have the ball at midfield for starting position, because that's almost a free 3 points, right? So I think that's the biggest thing for Penn State is if they have two turnovers again in this game like they did last week, I think Ohio State. I mean, that's 10 points right there for Ohio
Mhm.
State, and on top of the 28 they're probably already going to score on their normal amount of possessions for an average game. So I don't know. I think Penn State's in a very very tough spot, and um, I like Ohio State in this game. I think there's too many questions for Penn State to try and answer and figure out, and the loss last week I think only added more questions to them.